All right, this is my second walkthrough of a place I did in outer Sunset in San Francisco. And it's for some lady that was selling her place, I believe. Anyways, this was kind of a memorable shoot for me because I think it was like one of the first times I really felt like I nailed a new technique like properly. So I'm kind of gonna walk through that um, from the beginning in case anyone can benefit from this. So, starting from scratch, we have a flash shot, and then we have an ambient shot, which is this one. It's a little blown out, but that's okay. Um, we're gonna go through this as this is like very fresh. I've already done all the editing in the past, but we can start over and do a complete walkthrough. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down the ambient exposure just a little bit. We want the histogram to be to the right. A lot of times when it's too far right and it's clipping, which is the red right here, all that red stuff is clipping. That's bad. There's no data there. No like pixel definition. You want to usually avoid that unless you're not planning on using that. When a window is blown out, most of the time it's going to be clipping, but that's not a problem if you want the window to be blown out. But for this one, um, I'm gonna kind of play with the slider a sec and see what we got here. The other thing too is when I'm looking at my flash shot, I want to get the two exposures in the histogram somewhat in the same vicinity. Um, Sometimes you won't get it exactly right. You got to tweak it, but for the sake of this tutorial, we'll try to do our best here. I actually want to bump the exposure on this a bit. I think it'll look pretty good. I mean, honestly, in certain ways, a single flash would actually look just fine. I think dealing with this shadow here of the ceiling is kind of a no-no. It's kind of annoying. You can get away with it depending on the job or your client or whatever your preference is. But we're gonna go for excellence here. So you kind of see this peak here. This is kind of more on the right of the histogram, as they say. Um, I'm going to not mess with the white balance here because usually when you use flash, it's going to give you the closest white balance, more or less, than like compared to what it was in real life. So it's going to be a little more accurate. Ambient, not as much because color casts and whatnot. So you see here, here's the temp, here's the tint, this is the white balance. I'm going to duplicate this and see what it looks like in my ambient shot. So it was around 425. Whoa, that's a little on the orange side. Yeah. Let's see. And then I'll take the tint down to... Yeah, that doesn't actually look good. Huh. Well, then in this case, I'm just going to use the picker here and see whatever it says, I'm just going to go with. Sometimes you have to eyeball it. But getting the temp and the tint around the same for multiple frames is kind of ideal. But in this case, it doesn't really work so well. Also, if you hear like yelling in the vicinity, it's because I live on a busy street and there's a lot of psychos. So these are looking pretty good. I'm going to take the ambient shot, and the flash, and we are going to do one of the most important things, which is enable profile corrections and remove chromatic aberrations. I use a Samyang 12mm lens, and I'm going to sync these. This is good to know in general if you have a big batch. If you have a batch of like 40 files, to sync all the chromatic aberrations and the profile corrections at once is a good little time saver. So, click this button, synchronize. Now we're looking real good. From here, there's your files are prepped in Lightroom. This is kind of where you want to be. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to say edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Um, in the beginning, every photographer is a little different, and I watch a lot of different tutorials as well. Some people do more prep in Lightroom. I tend to do all the finishing prep towards the end, like, well, not prepping in Lightroom before I go to Photoshop. I usually do very minimal stuff in Lightroom beforehand, and then I do any kind of like finessing at the very end. Um, so, first things first, we're going to go to Edit, and we're going to Auto Align Layers. Sometimes I get a little sloppy and I miss this step. Um, it's just a good habit to be in. If your tripod's good, you shouldn't really have much issue, but when you're dealing with like really fine-tuned detail stuff, it does make a difference, and it's just a good habit to get into, so I have to remind myself. Um, I'm going to name the files, also a very good habit to get into. Keeps things organized, which I generally am not, so. Flash is going to be the base layer in this, and the top is going to be ambient. Um, Sometimes you'll hear about things like luminosity mode. In this case, I'm not actually going to do it. I think our two files for color and white balance are close enough that it's not going to make a big difference, and we won't get any kind of weird shadow artifacts, which happen in luminosity mode sometimes. Um, these are little things you kind of get used to and know the difference of over time. It's just takes a little experience. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a layer mask on the ambient, which is the top layer, and I'm going to invert the mask. One of the reasons why you do flambient technique, it's just very, very popular, is because when you have a flash, a straight up just single flash exposure, although it looks pretty good, once you start seeing these images over and over and over again, you start noticing there's like annoying things like this shadow here. It's a very harsh shadow. The elongated shadow here from the ceiling light. Those are the first two that actually stick out to me. And some people may not notice this, like clients might not, but you will. And over time, if you want to get better, these are the things you want to pay attention to. So I have my paintbrush here. This is the circular object. You want hardness to 0. Flow, I do 10%. Some people do 8, 9, 11. It's pretty much whatever at that point. And I'm going to just start blending in the two exposures. I'm blending in the ambient light to make it look a little more natural, give it a little more sexiness. I already think it's a little too bright on the bed. I might not even mess with that, actually. Let's see. Well, oftentimes I will disable layer mask and kind of look at what I'm comparing and where I want to see here. No shadow. I want to get to that level right over here. Boom, 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 boom. But then you kind of start running the risk of like developing other weird shadows too. It's kind of a little game of give and take sometimes, but I think that looks pretty good. The plant actually has some annoying shadows here in the back. It's a little too harsh. I'm gonna kind of work that out, massage it out. Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Sometimes I just kind of like just give some swipes. Randomly just start swiping sometimes. I'm gonna do that like right here just to see what's going on. Once you kind of start getting your flow, a little bit of glare I think is fine, not too much, but just a little bit. It just adds realism. Window's kind of blown out. There is absolutely nothing to see out this window, so I'm actually going to make it a little more blown out. Just start painting in the ambient layer. And the thing I want to focus on next, this is probably going to go way too long, but this I want to get rid of that shadow on the ceiling. I don't like it. No one likes it. And I want to brighten up the ceiling too. The aesthetic of these like really bright, airy rooms, I gotta say I like it. They're a little artificial, but there's something very picture magazine perfect about that kind of look. I'm actually gonna remove the ambient off the bed. I think this light streak, the contrast looks kind of nice. I think overall this photo is like okay. I think it's a little too bright, and a lot of stuff you just kind of figure out as you're going. You know, you're just like checking in on this, checking on that. I really like some aspects of it. Other aspects I think need some work, but that's okay because we're not finished. Roll the carpet. Boom. This was a single 8200 off-camera speed light or strobe or whatever it's called. One ambient layer, one flash, 2 frames, bingo, done. It's pretty simple once you start getting things kind of streamlined. You know what you're doing in the beginning. Yeah, it's going to be a little finicky. I mean, it's still finicky for me actually, so you just keep going, having fun with it. So I combine the layers, I merge them. I think this is okay for where it's at. I'm going to hit Command Save on Mac. This file is going to go back into Lightroom, and it'll appear in 1 second. I'm going to flag it. Not that you have to, but it's good to kind of isolate things once in a while. And then this is where the final steps happen. I'm gonna hit the saucy bumpy. It's just like my general preset for all interiors, for at least MLS. It adds contrast. Yeah, it's not too shabby. I think with a little bit of contrast, I'm gonna drop it down just like a tad, a quarter of like a stop. I think it looks pretty good. We're almost done. And then from there, one of the most important things, if not the top 3, is making sure your geometry, your verticals, your horizontals are all looking good. Sometimes auto fixes it. This was looking really good in camera, so I don't have to mess with it too much. Sometimes I can't even tell if I'm off at all. I think over time you kind of start seeing that too. This photo is good. This is done. This is just a single room, and I think after I did this took this shot about a year ago, and I've been trying all these different approaches, and finally everything started lining up. Since then, it's just been improving dramatically. So hopefully this kind of helps. It just a basic run through. So thanks for